our good friends at Project Veritas, they've done it again. It's just like these people are so stupid. They just keep talking to Project Veritas, and I think usually it's because they think they're on a date or something. So what I'm gathering is that Project Veritas has like a bunch of undercover people who are attractive. Do you get that sense? Because it's always on a date, right?
Yeah.
So
Although
it's
this time it was, yeah, so it was a male, right?
no, this is a female.
Well, the person being interviewed was female.
Yes, yes, the person being interviewed is a female, and I
Right.
think
I
the
think
person talking is a male.
right.
Yeah,
In the previous videos I'd seen, it's mostly the targets are male.
the targets are male, but sometimes they're also gay males.
Oh, okay.
So the
That's
undercover
good.
person would be a male, presumably. So Trinity School staff are on leave after admitting she sneaks agenda in the classroom. So this is very typical. This woman admits all sorts of things where this is a prestigious private school in New York City. She admits that she tries not to hire Catholics because they might be conservative. Definitely doesn't want to hire Republicans or old people because they are more likely to be conservative, and just admits to just running a ring of propaganda when she supposedly should be doing her job, which is to educate children. And people pay a lot at the school for that service.
I think
Um,
she's actually an administrator, right?
she's an administrator, but she hires teachers. She's clearly in a position where she can hire teachers, right?
Yeah.
So she's not a teacher, true, but she hires teachers and does her best to inject her leftist agenda in that process.
Right. So yeah, one of the things that stuck out to me was that she doesn't even speak proper English sentences. Or I mean, I don't know. Her sentences they aren't even logically correct.
So you're saying she's a dummy? Yeah, she
Yes.
probably is. And some of these quotes really stand out. Like, unfortunately, it's the white boys who feel very entitled to express their opposite opinions and just push back. And she wishes that she could even get rid of these people. Like, I don't know what that means.
That's really interesting. Do you think she's on a date with a white person?
You know what? Let me listen to it. I can't tell based on the voice. You can hear
Okay.
very little of it, but uh, my guess is yes. My guess it's she's on a date with a white male and she feels free to express these opinions, you know? Um, it's just I'm not shocked that this is happening, but what needs to happen is we need to highlight these every time single time something like this is exposed, we need to highlight them so that the left cannot gaslight us and say, "Oh, this is just, a very, very isolated incident." It's like how it's happening all the time. How isolated is it really?
Hmm.
And this is really only a person who A, Project Veritas is targeted, and B is stupid enough to admit this sort of stuff to a almost stranger.
Hmm.
I have to imagine, I have to assume that this is so much more common than what we're seeing. This is just a tip of the iceberg. Stop gaslighting us. This is really happening. There are these radical school teachers and school administrators who are abandoning their responsibility to teach children and instead spending their energy proselytizing to them, inundating them with propaganda, and a lot of parents aren't even aware of it. And this is a private school, so this is the type of thing the free market could fix. Like, if you still want your kid to go here, go ahead, send them there and pay the money. But the more this is exposed, the better, because then if people don't want their kids to go to a place like this, then they can pull their kids, and the free market can speak. Pull your kids from this school, and don't let them give you the line where, oh, this person doesn't represent our school. The hell she doesn't represent your school. How can Think about it. How can a person like this feel so emboldened to act out this way at work if that wasn't the predominant culture at work, right? If you were the minority, like for instance, if we, obviously not being leftists, we're on the right side of the spectrum, if we were working at a very liberal institution, a college or whatever, and we were in administration, would we feel free to say, "Oh yeah, I try to, push students this way, and I try to, only get right-leaning speakers, and I cancel all the left-leaning speakers, and I don't hire people who don't agree with my beliefs. Would we do that? No. We
Oh, wait,
probably
wait,
try to
wait.
hide.
Doesn't it
Huh?
depend who you're speaking with, though?
What are you talking about?
I mean, if I was talking to you, I wouldn't try to hide what I'm doing, right? But if I'm talking to, I don't
Well,
know,
she's talking to just some person she just met on a date, probably, right?
right?
And she's very freely saying, "Well, at work, I do all of these things that you're not doing your job. You're just pushing a ideological agenda." If
But
she
maybe
were in the
her, yeah, but maybe her assumption is that the person that she's on a date with shares her agenda.
Yes, that is her assumption, but what I'm trying to say is she wouldn't feel comfortable doing all these things at work if her viewpoint was in the minority and her way of doing things was abnormal at work, right?
Hmm.
I I, I assume, I think fairly, that there are a lot of people like her at her school. Because if I were working in a leftist institution, I would try to hide my beliefs. I would try not to draw any attention. I would not
Hmm.
be pushing, like I would not be hiring people or bringing in speakers based on my idiot, because I would out myself. I would be, I would be a problem. People might notice me. I
Yeah,
wouldn't do any of that stuff because I just want to have a job. I need a paycheck, right? She feels free to do all of this stuff because she knows that the vast majority of people there agree with her and they co-sign on this stuff. So
right,
it's fine. It's fine for her to behave this way. Instead of fulfilling her duty to educate children, she's fulfilling her, like, in her mind, duty to proselytize, to feed propaganda because that's how people around her feel. They all agree with that. She's comfortable doing it.
right.
That's what we can
Even
that's what I assume.
yeah, even if you look at their official their official statement, they're using the word they're using the woke keyword inclusive, right?
Right. They
Uh,
said, "Oh, we're
yeah,
what is
right
it said?
there, there as
We
part of
will
this
we
process.
we will review protocols and practices that are in place to ensure that we are living up to our determination to build a more inclusive community." Well, this woman probably is perfectly in line with that mission, right? If their mission was, um, if they said to ensure that we are living up to our determination to educate children to the best of our ability, then no, she's probably not living up to that. But since their determination is to create a more inclusive community, she's probably right in line with it, which leads me to believe that the other people there agree with her. And in fact, one of the things they said was they're so disappointed with her being recorded against her will or something like that. Well, first of all, it was legal in that state. And second of all, that tells us that their main problem is that we're seeing it, that it's being outed. Their main problem isn't that there's an administrator that has these priorities, which are so
Mm,
tangential, tangentials being charitable, to the mission of educating children. She has you know, this agenda that is entirely tangential, perhaps even contrary. They don't care about that. They care about the fact that we have to address this now, and the New York Post is talking about it. They're angry about that. And they've only reiterated their commitment to inclusivity, which I think at the end of the day will just include her either retaining her job or getting a nice parachute. That's what's going to happen because she was in line with it and the school is on board with it. She's not a rogue agent. Let's put it that way. She is just a person who made the mistake of saying the quiet part out loud to somebody at Project Veritas. That's her mistake. She's not a rogue agent, okay? I'm not saying all teachers are like this. I know personally, I know some people who are teachers, and when I talk to them about things like this, they often say, "Well, that's just such a minority and whatever." And like, well, is it though? I would love to dig into this a little bit deeper, but I think that perhaps the people who are extreme about it are a minority, but I think that the culture is tilting in that direction because if the culture weren't on that side of the issue of things, right? If it wasn't tilting towards leftism, if it wasn't tilting towards Marxism, then these types of people wouldn't feel so comfortable doing this. Because at the end of the day, I think that people they do prioritize self-preservation. They want to keep a job, they want to get a paycheck. They would prioritize that. They wouldn't feel free to do all this stuff. Like, I give you an example. Before George Floyd, uh, the NFL took a very hard line on people making political statements about BLM or anything else, right? Like Colin Kaepernick was blackballed from the league because the league didn't want any of that. And players just had to adapt. And what did you see? You saw almost every player be quiet, not talk about social issues, not talk about political issues because they wanted their paycheck. After George Floyd, they and everybody it sort of flipped, and now all the sports leagues were for social justice. Then all of a sudden, they all felt free to talk about it and say, "Oh, I'm a social justice warrior too." Or like I'm all for this, and like a lot of players went ahead and felt comfortable to talk about this stuff or act in a different way. And the reason why is because the culture changed. The culture changed overnight. And so when you see a person that's this comfortable, it's not a rogue agent. I think it's we can safely assume that it's a tip of the iceberg and they're indicative of a larger culture. And we've seen enough of teachers like this who say, "I'm a communist. I teach them this. I talk about my gay relationships or whatever it is they want to talk about." We've seen enough of this sort of thing to conclude that the wider culture is a problem in education. It's not just a few rogue, crazy teachers. Would you say that's the case?
Probably. I mean, in this case, given that it's a rich New York neighborhood, I mean, probably I would have to assume even the parents maybe even want this. Like most of the parents probably even want this.
Yeah, and if the parents want it, that's cool. Then they can keep on sending their kids to the school. They could keep on paying whatever it is they pay. Uh, Tuition. It says here tuition is $58,000 a year.
Unfortunately, for the parents that don't want it, there probably aren't a lot of options. That would be my assumption.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. I would say that, well, I think there are, well, if you can pay this amount, there's always options for you. You're a rich person, right? Only a rich person would pay $58,000 for a kid to go to high school. So you could easily pay tutors. You could easily have them homeschooled. You could easily send them far away to a place that's in line with your values. You could move probably. You have options when you're of this level of wealth. But
Hmm.
what I worry about is parents who obviously don't have this sort of wealth and don't have the option, and they have to send their kid to a public school, and that is their option. And yet that public school is doing the same sort of crap.
So I think you just gave me a good business idea, which is
Charter
just to start.
schools?
No, just to start a tutoring company that has non-woke tutors.
Yeah, that might be a great business idea, you know? And you don't need that many customers to make this profitable because you're already your customer base is already, very wealthy people. Um, but I'm afraid that is your only option. Fortunately for these people, they are wealthy enough to pursue many options. But like I said, what if your kid is being sent to a public school and this is what it's like? People need to know about this because then you don't have the option to pull them out and homeschool them or send them to another school far away. Your only option is to vote your beliefs and use the ballot box to get what you need, which is a neutral, politically neutral education focused on preparing children to be productive adults. And, and that seems it seems like a weird thing to say. Like, no, not weird, radical. It seems like a radical thing to say that that's what education should be, even though, yeah, that's common sense tells you that's what education should be. There's so many people who seem to think that education should be, oh, I'm teaching kids to be more inclusive. I'm teaching them to be open-minded. Where I was like, that's not what it's for. I mean, that's not what most people think it should be for. So, if you really need your kids to learn those things, then teach them on your own time. I think that for the vast majority of people, it needs to be practical. It needs to be productive. It needs to create productive citizens. And yeah, I don't think this is creating productive citizens. It's we're how many times you have to look at stats where we are behind. Our children's test scores are behind countries that spend less on kids and have a lower GDP per capita than us. How embarrassing is that? So, countries that are poorer than the United States in every single way produce children that academically outperform our children in every single way. How is that acceptable? And how does that come about? I guarantee you that it comes about chiefly because of stuff like this. This is the type of stuff that is just a distraction, a waste of time. Do you think kids in South Korea are learning this? No, they're learning STEM, right? And here's what else, they're probably learning English too. Like some South Korean kids
Mhm.
probably speak English better than kids in our schools. That's embarrassing. Why? Because they know English is an important language to know on in the global economy, so they learn it.
Yeah,
We don't even seem to understand that.
unfortunately, I feel like this is probably catching a lot of parents by surprise, right? When parents, I feel like when parents these days are choosing to have kids, they didn't sign themselves up for. I mean, this reminds me of the you know I heard this on Timcast, right, where he was having a discussion with some woman, and then basically Tim was just trying to tell this woman, you're a parent that you basically have full responsibility, and if these schools are woke or whatever, you should just homeschool them, right?
Right,
But
right. Typical Tim
it,
response.
but as if this woman had, assumed he assumed that this woman had the resources to do so, and
Yeah,
I'm I'm sure most parents probably do not have the resources to
most
do
don't.
this.
Most don't.
Yeah.
Absolutely, most people cannot afford to homeschool or private school their children. And you can say, "Oh, that's your fault for being poor." Like, okay, but you're also
No,
missing
no,
the
actually,
detail.
what he said was that, or the way I remember he basically said, "Oh, well, you chose to be a parent, right?" But I think like when most people are choosing to be parents, they weren't thinking like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna have to homeschool my kid," right? Like
Correct. Right.
that wasn't common or typical, I would say.
Because yeah, because they were told that this country has a public education system that can capably educate children. And it's been a lie. And so if we're lying to parents and they have kids, I wouldn't blame them. And Tim always has these like dumb ideas about what you should do. Like you don't like the government, move out to the country and grow chickens or something, like raise chickens. What the fuck? I mean, who the hell can go do that? We don't all have like $1 million podcasts. Like most people cannot afford to pull their kids out of public school, and let alone the fact that hey, you know what? They paid for that school with their taxes. So they've already paid for this product that they're getting. It's not unfair for them to demand that the product produce good results, right? Or at least the results that they want. Because you already paid for it. That's stupid. That would be like saying, "Hey, you don't like the U.S. military? Then hire your own private military to protect your house." What? They already tax me to pay for the U.S. military. It needs to do its job. I'm not going to hire my own private military like Cobra or whatever. It's not going to be like a private military company. Okay, we need these institutions to work because they were promised to function. And for the vast majority of people, they don't have the means to avoid it. That's just ridiculous. Don't like the roads, don't like the potholes on the roads, build your own roads. It's just ridiculous. You can't that kind of thinking, it can't apply to everything, especially for things that are a public good, um, that we've already been billed for. I've already paid for it. So this is a product that needs to serve me. If I didn't pay for it yet, you might have an argument because then I could take, whatever money that I would have paid for, the public school system and then instead homeschool my kids. Then you'd have an argument. But since I've already been paying for public schools my entire life, or well,
It's
since I've
still
been a
okay.
taxpayer.
Yeah, it's still the time though. I mean, people, that's a lot of time that you're gonna have to spend. I mean, okay, I guess if you assume homeschooling includes
Tutors, maybe.
hiring tutors and stuff.
Right.
But,
So yeah, people don't have the money for that, and you've already extracted money from them for the public school. So it's really unfair to ask them to spend even more money on tutors. Like I said, it's not even a situation where you haven't taken the money from them yet for the public schools. You've already taken it. So yeah, they're right to demand that these schools do their job. This is just I just want to keep highlighting these things, not because I want teachers to feel bad, like, oh, this is all teachers. No, of course it's not all teachers, but I I know even when I was in high school, which I won't say when it was, but it was a while ago, it was even tilting in that direction, like this sort of leftist Marxist, yeah, political agendas are just part of the fabric of your education. Like, why are political agendas part of the fabric of my education? This is not what my parents want. This is not what I want. This is not what's going to make me a productive citizen. So this is bad in every single way, except for your very narrow interest as a a leftist teacher. You just want clones of you. You just want to produce clones of you, which is, screw you. Who are you to do that? These are not your kids. That's another thing. The presumption, the the I would say even immorality of trying to shape children who are not your own. Why would you ever think that your values? It would be like if I um babysat one of my friend's kids or something,
Hmm.
or they came over and just stayed for like a day or two for whatever reason. And I thought, well, this is my chance to make them love Ron DeSantis. What the hell? That is not your place. That's like, oh, they really need to, you know, I need to extol the virtues of net taxpayer voting to other people's children. No, that's not your place. And I would say that it would be immoral for you to try to do that because it's up to the parents to instill values in their children. Now, if they have values that I disagree with, oh well. Oh well, they're not my children. So what? That's fine. They're your children. You try to instill your values into them, okay? That's what these administrators and teachers are like. they 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 are just trying to create clones of themselves with
Do
other
you,
people's children.
do you draw the line firmly with parents versus non-parents having the kind of the right to instill values on their
Um
kids?
when you say parents, you mean you're the parent of that child, right?
Right, right.
Yes, I would. I would say
So,
that I would
so
say
like,
that
yeah, if you're like, would it, so it would not be appropriate for like aunt or uncle, for example.
no, I don't think it's appropriate for an aunt or uncle either, you know?
Okay.
I would say that I would say that if the aunt or uncle discussed it with the parents and said, "Do you think your kids should learn this or whatever?" and then they said, "Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea." Then okay, fine. But if they totally disagree with it, I think it's not really your position because they're not your children. And, you know, Um, just speaking of it from I guess this is not really the right way to speak of it, but they have way more skin in the game. Like they made the parents made the sacrifice of having kids, right? So that's a monetary cost, and that's a time cost, and that's an emotional cost, and they've sunk in this big investment into these things called children. And I think that affords them the privilege, the right, not privilege, right to be the first ones to instill values in those kids because they paid the cost to be parents.
Hmm.
I would never, and I know lots of dumb parents with really dumb ideas, but I would never presume to try to teach their kids something other than what they um, at least co-sign, right? I
Hmm.
don't mind. I don't mind. I don't mind. Teaching kids, other people's kids, what I know or whatever. But I need them to co-sign it.
Hmm.
And when you teach at an institution, I feel like they've only co-signed you to teach them, biology, math, English. They didn't co-sign you to teach your ideology or, your sexual whatever. Unless they did, like you said, if a lot of these parents are for that, they're like, yeah, yeah, teach my kid Marxism. That's great. Okay, then that's fine. That's fine. That's what they paid for. That's what they want. Then go ahead. But this is not what most parents want.
So I think I've broken your
Yeah, you probably
rule,
have. Yeah.
but yeah, I feel like your logic is sound, and maybe going forward, I'll just shut up.
Well, you don't have
Um,
to shut up, but I would say, at least have the discussion with the parents of,
yeah.
would you be okay if I talk about these topics, and not necessarily with a point of view, Or if you have a point of view, then mention that. But I think, yeah, no, the parents, they have the right to shape their children the way they want. Now, it doesn't always turn out that way. Lots of kids rebel. Kids, are not clay. They will not be moldable very often, but it is up to the parents. And yeah, so that type of thing is going to come up often because I feel like Project Veritas will keep doing this with teachers, and there's a lot of them out there because, as I assert, this is a cultural thing. It's endemic to the culture of education in the United States. So we'll see this a lot. So we'll talk about this more and more often.